Good evening and welcome to 5 Minutes at Sunset. I'm Tony McLean Brown. Thank you for joining us for another beautiful sunset and a quick chat. If you like the energy or if I hit a nerve, please feel free to post your comments. Appreciate you. Now let's go to work. This week's episode is about plan your work, work your plan. We're here at Penley Produce where I first learned about the fundamentals of work planning. I worked here on this family farm with my granddaddy until I went off to college at NC State. In part of the Happy God book we wrote, we talked about the role of work planning in your life. I had a quote that was broken out that said, "The journey of the soul is a soul journey. I believe it is a solo flight worth some pre-flight planning." And a lot of people have talked to us about that. So today, I'd like to talk about 3 basics of work planning that I think will affect how you work at home or at work or your extracurricular activities. First basic idea is what I would call rat and the snake. You have to think about a project like it's a snake, and your job is to push that rat from the beginning to the end, and you don't get to skip. I learned this from a fellow named Chris Garrett when I worked at Touche Ross. He went on to work at IBM, but he understood what a critical path was and how you had to pay respect to it to make a project come in on budget and on time. We do this when we flight plan. When we plan to leave out of Key West and head to Boston, you think about everything from pre-flight to the time you turn the engines off and every stage of flight from beginning to end. We got a video I'd like to show you right now that shows you just how advanced something as simple as going on an airplane flight uses these types of tools. The second basic about work planning is called 9 women can't have a baby in a month. This gets to the very basic understanding of resource management and when you should bring more people in or when you should take people off of a project. A good friend of mine and colleague, John Shaughnessy, he understood this as much as anyone I knew. And if I sat in one meeting, I sat in 100, where he was explaining to the client that we can have everybody in the world standing around, or we can let the 1 or 2 technicians finish their job and then bring in resources to follow up. And it's a very sophisticated way of looking at the way you do work, but it was the same thing we did here when we cut hay. We could have everybody in the world standing around watching the guy with the baler cut the hay and bale it, but you couldn't go to pick it up until you're finished. So we had everybody doing other things, and then when the hay was baled and ready to go, that fella sat down and all the rest of us went and put it in the barn. The third and final basic that we're going to talk about today is you don't know what you don't know. And that gets down to, independent verification and validation. Lori Thornton, who works with Technology Consultant, I watched her do this as well as anybody on a project out in Hawaii. She was able to, it's almost like measure 3 times, cut once. Making sure that you planned your work and then you work your plan, understanding things are going to change. Good example would be back in 1978, we were here. We planted a bunch of beans and squash. There was a trucker's strike. Price of beans went up to $40 a bushel. The price of squash went down to $1 a bushel. All that was because the trucks couldn't move the produce in and out. We had to make a switch. Normally, we would have focused on the squash. We went back to the beans, made our money on beans. So for you folks who didn't grow up here in the hills of western North Carolina, those 3 work planning basics are: make sure you understand your critical path, make sure you've allocated the right resources at the right time in the project, and make sure you implement some type of independent verification and validation system so that when you work your plan, you've worked it accordingly to the plan you made. So why does any of this matter? I don't care if you're a parent trying to figure out how to remotely educate your kid. I don't care if you're a church trying to figure out how to continue to serve your congregation during COVID, or you're at PCG trying to put in a new financial management system. These basics, which are, you got to push the rat through the snake, 9 women can't have a baby in a month, and you don't know what you don't know, are principles that you need to cling to as you plan your work and work your plan. This has been 5 Minutes at Sunset. I'm Tony Brown. Hope to see you next week. Appreciate you.